Hi, I'm going to give you my testimony today about my experience with Jesus. And basically, I didn't grow up in church at all. My family I was born in Ohio, and as a young child, the only church I ever got was Bible school. And that was just in the summertime and occasionally. My parents were good people, but they just didn't go to church. I believe my mom believes in God, but we didn't go to church. And I would kind of see friends and wish that I could go and didn't get to go. And when I was 9 years old, we moved to Ohio, or we moved from Ohio to Oklahoma. And about 8 months or so after we were here, my dad, we also moved out here to Oklahoma with my mom's sister and her husband. So it was my family and my aunt, her husband, and their 2 children. We all moved to Oklahoma together. When we got here to Oklahoma, I say here, we're in Texas now, but when we got to Oklahoma, we were there about 8 months, and my dad had an affair with my mom's sister that had moved to Oklahoma with us. And no one knew it but me. I was in 5th grade at the time, and I saw it happen. Not in great detail. I saw them kissing one time. And I kept it inside and I didn't tell anyone. But it was about that time, for some reason, I decided that I should start praying. And I started praying that we would not move back to Ohio. For some reason, I started to like Oklahoma, and I thought that I should stay there. I don't know. I think that was the Holy Spirit moving in my life. And I started praying. And my parents divorced, and we stayed in Oklahoma. And my dad moved off with my mom's sister, who became his wife. And we stayed there my whole life. Grew up in Oklahoma, just my mom and I. Didn't go to church still. And I continued to pray. But, you know, I was a teenager and not zealously, and I made lots of mistakes. And grew up and continued to make lots of mistakes and didn't go to church. Made mistakes similar to my parents' mistakes. And learned that they were not evil, you know, for divorcing and the problems and things that they did. I grew to forgive my dad, because that's what you do. And I was very lost in a time in my life, late 20s, and decided to start going to church. And started going to church, and that was the time that I decided that I needed to be a Christian. I got baptized, and was just going to church on my own, and also read the whole Bible from front to back. And I was 29. It was like my 29th birthday. And I was single and living in Tulsa, and I decided that I didn't want to be single anymore. I wanted to be married, and even though I'd made all the mistakes I'd made, God had always stayed with me and always saved me from situations, which was ridiculous. I feel like my moving to Oklahoma was a blessing. And staying in Oklahoma with just my mom and I was a blessing. I felt like that was God's hand, and it's obvious now when you step back and look at things that makes no other sense, but it has to be God. And when I was 29, it was my birthday, and I remember sitting at the table of my little house in Tulsa. I had been going to church, I read the Bible, but I still hadn't found somebody for me forever, a husband. And I remember praying because I was about to go out to dinner with my mom and her new husband, and I thought that was pretty pathetic to have that kind of date for your 29th birthday. And I prayed, God, please let me meet the one. I want to be a wife. I want to be a mother. I would like to meet my husband. I would like to meet, my husband. I don't want to be a girlfriend. And went out to eat with my parents, and came home and went back to work. And about 2 weeks later, I met John, who was not from Tulsa. He was from Oklahoma City, a couple hours away. And he was nothing like anybody I'd ever been around. No one I would have remotely even thought about dating, but he was down to earth. And he fixed things around my house. And he was real. And he was a blessing. And still is every day. And we got to talking, and like you do when you get to know someone. And he too had kind of a not growing up life in church, every single Sunday. He went more than me, but he had, about 2 weeks before we met, went and got a haircut from a lady, a family friend, who was a devout Christian, and he was saying, I just wish I could meet a woman, meet the one. And she said, well, have you ever prayed about it? And he said, no, And she said, you should pray to God to ask to meet a wife. And he said he left the haircut place there, and in his truck pulled over on the side of the road on the way home and prayed to meet a wife and not to date anymore, and just to meet the one. And it was about 2 weeks before, and it was about the same time I prayed. And John and I are completely convinced that God put us together. And I'm completely convinced that it wasn't just the prayer 2 weeks before, but it was the taking me out of Ohio, and maybe the broken marriage of my parents, and all the mistakes I made, the broken road that led me not just to John, but to faith every day. And when I look around in my life, in my world, I make a lot of mistakes, and all the time I lose faith. And I think you're lying if you're a Christian and you say that you don't. It's not that I don't believe in God or I don't believe in Jesus. I just get disheartened and down. But He's constantly, ridiculously giving gifts in the smallest things, constantly assuring, constantly loving, and giving things that we don't deserve, bigger plans. I would have never planned John. I would have never planned my children, who are completely perfect in my heart. It's ridiculous how much God has given me that I don't deserve, and friends and family, and this good town. We came to Ponder as another blessing. We're from Oklahoma, and it's just been gift after gift here. And we came to this church. We had went to Methodist Church in Tuttle, but we came to this church because it met at 11 o'clock, and we like to sleep in. And it was the Methodist church. But when we walked in, it was the tiny church across town. We were not loving the tiny church, but we had been at another church that we had lots of other preachers. And that Methodist church, they had a turnaround of like once a year we'd get a new preacher. And we heard you preach, Rocky, and when we heard you preach, we were just done. We didn't look at any other churches. We thought about trying the Baptist church, but we were done. And we said, man, if that guy could have been in Tuttle, that would have been a good deal. But you've been here, and we've been here almost 9 years, and you haven't left, so that's a good thing. And we're thankful to be here. We're thankful for the mercies that God gives every day. And it's a lot of hope that we get here. And we're just thankful. And that's my story, and that's it.